The next little thing we're going to talk about is kind of like Vim in a hurry. Some of you hopefully are used to working with real command line tools, and some of you are not. That's cool. As someone who works on exclusively front end projects here at Axonify, I could totally get away with, except for very few instances, never touching the command line. I could use Sublime Text or TextMate or whatever, any of those GUI-based editors, and only have to rely on command line stuff for merging, branching, and then updating my clients or server builds. And otherwise, I could kind of be happy and just live inside the GUI and not sort of worry about or not look into these other options and see how they work out. Pardon me. So, despite the write-up and sort of intro Ned gave on the forum, this is a bit closer to sort of saying hello to Vim as opposed to going to the next level with Vim, because it's the sort of thing like I've only been using Vim for, honestly, I've been here 6 months, so I've been using it for 6 months minus a day or two kind of thing, because I thought like I should finally figure it out. Although I think there's some advanced stuff I've learned, although I'd really like to learn more from you. And so this is as much, so there's two sort of outcomes from this. One is that you get a gentle intro to Vim, or two, the other one is that you get to come to me and tell me about how you use it and how it makes your life better and how I could make my life better by copying some of your techniques. So I have tried Emacs. I didn't get it, so I sort of refer to Vim as like Emacs for mortals, which is maybe tongue-in-cheek. I know there's supposed to be some sort of like conflict between the two, but there we are. So who's a for? Can read devs or normals. If you're used to using GUI-only applications, maybe it's time to like dive in and learn how to like have some more familiarity with the command line. There's lots of reasons for that, because as a developer or someone who is a hobbyist or just dabbling, wants to understand how a computer works, I mean, unless like any sort of general purpose computing platform such as an OS 10, so BSD Linux based laptop or desktop or Raspberry Pi or whatever else, if you want to make your computer sort of bend to your will, you really need to be comfortable on the command line, and getting to learn how to type in a text editor on the command line is, I think, a really good way to increase that familiarity with and on the command line.
I'll add one more thing. If you're a system administrator, if you're on the OS or a database or something, you have to know BI, because you might not be able even to boot up into GUI mode.
Of course, yeah. So there's that aspect as well. I think I get to that at another point. But yeah, because there will be systems that such as like the Raspberry Pi, or as you say, if you SSH into a remote system, I mean, chances are all you've got is your text line. All you've got is command line, and you're going to have to change something or do some forensic work and figure out what the heck's going on, and you'll need a tool to do that with. And often Vim or VI is your only choice. But so what is Vim? Vim is this. You saw it earlier. It's just it's a text editor. I mean, at its core, that's it, right? That's what it does. It lets you manipulate text, save it, overwrite it, do some other stuff. Like, that's it, right? Wow, that's incredible. Yes, in fact, that is all it is. But there's more, because it's not just that. If you want to, or if you put some time in to learn it, understand how it works, and understand how it is just another component in sort of a long tool chain that can integrate to your workflow with a lot of other tools, and often can be sort of the jumping off point for how you interact with those other tools. And take away from this, which is I think really key to understanding what Vim is and how it works is that it's mode-based. There's different different modalities, interaction modes when you're using the application, and that's different from many other programs that we use, especially when they have a GUI, and that like sort of all the menus are accessible at all the times, and the idea that at any given time, in sort of this context, you could maybe do everything or anything, but that's not exactly true. Whereas in Vim, it's very important that the mode you're in, that context will determine what your available actions are, and moving between modes and understanding what to do in each mode is really important, and will make your life a lot easier while you're using this tool. So there's a bunch of reasons not to use it. Most of these are kind of like ridiculous and off the cuff, because they're not real reasons not to use it. But you mentioned VI. I've used VI, but I mean, there's a reason they call it VI improved. That's sort of what Vim stands for. If you use Nano, that's cool. Like, I've spent a lot of time in university using Nano, and that's, it more than got the job done. But I really think, there's compelling reasons for you to upgrade to using Vim. And real reasons not to use it, you could be using a really awesome IDE that is integrated with all kinds of other tools and debuggers and memory wrappers and whatnot, in which case maybe Vim isn't for you because it doesn't fit into that workflow the same way. Although you can still write some great Objective-C or Swift in Vim. You can still write some great Java. Ruby, I don't use an IDE for Ruby, I only use Vim. So there's lots of ways you can get around that, but if those are tools that are really helpful to you, then you're probably not going to want to jump into using Vim sort of 80 or 100% of the time. But the reasons to use it, real ultimate power, absolutely. And the second point there about contextual tools are interesting. That goes back to that notion of modes, because you have, depending on the mode, depending on the task you have at hand, there's different modes you're going to use to do that, and it really simplifies what you have to kind of like what you can do in that context, and that kind of that memory requirement in your head about what am I going to do here? What are the keystrokes? It's a reduced sort of set of instructions you can do in that mode, so you can really focus on editing, on sort of search and replace, on whatever it is. And as we said earlier, it's available pretty much everywhere. You got SSH into a random machine, rad, you got access, no problem. You want to hack on an old Amiga, it's going to have Vim, it's going to run everywhere, which is kind of both a strength and a weakness of Vim, in that if a platform was ever targeted for Vim to run on, the current version will run on that, provided you're using the sort of the mainline fork, which I think is incredible, like an incredible feat, an incredible achievement, but also means that when you want to update and use new plugins, that things can go not the way you expected. So how to get started? Use vanilla Vim. Just go in, use it as it is. Don't worry about going through all those fancy dot files and that config stuff, because it will only serve to confuse you and teach you bad habits. It's better that you develop your own bad habits rather than, for instance, run my dot file setup and now you have my bad habits and don't know why I do those things. Some of them I have good reasons, some of them just superstition or whatever else. But this is a really great tool. Any system that has Vim installed will or should have Vim Tutor, which is another program you just run from the command line, and that will actually go walk you through about, I think, 45 different exercises you do just in that program, and it's sort of a sandbox version of Vim, so you can't do anything too crazy, mess up any other installs of Vim, and it'll give you a feel for how things actually work, and show you all kinds of really intricate secrets about how to, like delete only the next two capitalized words, or skip ahead X number of words if they are capitalized, or there's a really complex search and replace, and visual selection, all kinds of crazy stuff. So you should go through the Vim tutor and at least work through the first, I think, 11 exercises, and then you'll understand how navigation works, how file navigation and opening and closing and those kind of things work, and then you can actually do some good or maybe some damage with Vim. And once you've got to that point, then that's sort of moving past simply creating text files, sort of opening, saving, editing. There's a lot of things you will be missing from your GUI editor. So, for example, Sublime Text, a lot of shortcut keys there that you've got that will give you like find and replace, or reformatting based on. Let's say you dump some text in there and you want to reformat it in JSON format, or do JSON validation or whatever else. Like those things are kind of built in or accessible via plugins in your GUI editor, whereas they're not part of the native Vim install. So you'll add those on via plugins and other customizations you have with pardon me various things you add to your Vim RC, and these are the things that kind of file navigation was pretty straightforward, but search and replace is interesting because it's depending on how your Vim is configured. It may just use like PCRE, like regex, like pro compatible regular expressions, or it may have a slightly different version. So you're gonna have to figure that out, which is not the most straightforward thing. And then if you're used to having sort of a tiled interface where you have either splits in your Sublime text editor, or you having multiple windows, managing splits within a single console window takes a little bit of effort, because it's not quite as natural as it may seem. And then one really cool thing I like, one of the many cool things I like about Vim is that. So that fourth line there, that running console commands from inside Vim, so that if there's something you want to do, such as you want to check the output of, you have a test runner and you want to check the output of that, you don't have to leave Vim to do that. You can do that from within. You can just call a command line, like a bash or a Z shell command from within it, which is neat because then you don't have to you don't break that, you don't have to change that mental context. It's that, I'm here doing this thing and I have this other sort of side task that should take 5 seconds to run your tests or whatever else. So you just do it really quickly and then it's there. You get the output and you jump back in, which is nice. Or like me, whenever I'm doing any Ruby or Rails work, I have it set up so that on save, whenever I save a Ruby file or I save a CoffeeScript file, it automatically runs the unit tests in the case of Ruby, or it will automatically run the CoffeeScript compiler and linter to make sure that everything I wrote was just valid, and I don't have to worry about going back after the fact that I saved it. I saved it, and then it causes an error later. It's part of the workflow, and it's done, which I really like, because it's just automatic that way. This is the front edge, so ostensibly most of you are in or care about or have some interest in front end work, and very often, the naive kind of point of view on that, if you're kind of new to this world or are sort of on the outside as a hobbyist, it's like, well, I just want to work on the sort of look and feel and the user interface. Like, why do I need to worry about using or learn how to use this admittedly complicated, complex command line tool, which doesn't let me use my mouse, and I have to move around by using J, K, H, and L. And what the heck does all that mean? Moving line by line or 5 lines at a time. What's the point? When we have all these really great sort of more designy tools. But my perspective on that is that once upon a time, this is Dreamweaver from I don't know what year. But like that used to be front end work. Is that a bit of drag and drop, a bit of customization with the markup, and then that's it. You know, because you're going to work with a fairly static language like HTML or maybe some PHP that's going to be templating and whatnot. But that is, I think, for fewer and fewer people and fewer front end roles, that's no longer the reality. The reality is that like front end work more often looks like this, where you've got to run a bunch of build scripts, or you're using grunts or gulp or some other sort of JS build tool to like automate things, because you're bringing in so many different different tools and technologies together, and no longer is it simply a matter of front end work just means, oh well, I only have to worry about the HTML and CSS, and I can do that sort of live edit and then update the text file, and that's fine. Because now with various CSS, precompilers and whatnot, like Sass or Less and whatnot, now like these front end languages, which used to be, I think, probably more accessible and easier to pick up because sort of the scope that they encompassed was much smaller. Whereas now, if you want to do, if you're working on front end apps, so like ours, we use Backbone as the core of the front end application for Exonify, and then we use Marionette underscore and a couple other libraries for helper functions and for templating and whatnot. So it's no longer simply a matter of, I'm going to write this HTML page and I'm going to write this separate sort of style sheet applied to that, because now even working on CSS, like that stuff is all generated. That's basically a programming language now, which is really interesting and really exciting for me, because if it was simply like if it was just writing that kind of like boring static stuff, that would like that's 1998 kind of thing, and we're much past that. So that is to say, if you work in the front end, you probably already do or soon will have to use like much more complicated tools, and part of using those much more complicated tools and technologies is being comfortable in the command line, and Vim is like a meta command line inside the command line, which I think is pretty cool and useful. Yeah, so there are a few links here. So that first one, Destroy All Software. If any of you are familiar with Gary Bernhardt, and he has a really awesome presentation called WAT, W-A-T. If you forget anything else I said, that's cool. Go look up that talk because it's hilarious. But he has a series of screencasts called Destroy All Software, and probably a third, a quarter to a third of those screencasts focus on understanding Unix and Linux tools better, with a big emphasis on Vim and scripting and whatnot. And that's where I learned a lot of the sort of shortcuts, and learned about how to set those auto commands so that on save things automatically happen and whatnot. So that second link, thoughts and opinions on using Vim, is a little bit tongue in cheek, because I believe it starts out saying don't, and then kind of says here's 50 reasons why you shouldn't do it, because I believe the word this gentleman uses is don't be a Vimposter, which I think only nerds really appreciate. That third link, github.com/tpope. Tim Pope is responsible for just an incredible amount of Vim plugins that will do wonderful and incredible things to increase your productivity in Vim. And I don't think he gets nearly the recognition he deserves, either the accolades or the sort of financial rewards for basically enabling millions of people to do their jobs better. Fourth link, NeoVim. That's a really interesting one. So Vim is VI improved, and as I said, Vim will run on any and every platform it has ever targeted, up to 25, 30, 40 years ago kind of thing. I don't know if it's that old, but anyway. Whereas NeoVim is an updated version of it, which is slimmed down. I think the code size is like 1/3, but it's meant to be fully backward compatible, but using modern modern technology. So instead of being all written in, having components written in C or Perl or sort of really kind of old style languages or targeting older compilers, much of NeoVim is written in Python and will allow you to run Python plugins natively, whereas Vim does not necessarily do that. And then the last one, Vim Adventures, is kind of fun if you don't want to deal with Vim Tutor as a command line sort of how-to. You can go to Vim Adventures, and it's kind of like a little it's an RPG that teaches you how various Vim commands by making you walk through dungeons and like fight monsters and whatnot. And it's pretty. I'll give you a brief sort of example of that one. Where is it? There we go. And so here it is. So with almost no sort of explanation, it's sort of telling you how to walk through, and you just kind of figure it out yourself. So walking through the maze, which is not quite so interesting with you watching me, but and then as you come across each of these characters, they give you hints about how things work and sort of what your next task is, such as you have to go up and unlock that treasure chest, but oh no, there's boulders in the way. How do you get past that? Okay, so maybe it's BW. Oh, pardon me. You have to acquire the W first. Anyway, you walk through and sort of it starts with a very restricted set of commands you can do, and then it grows from there. I thought it was fun. It entertained me more than sort of taught me anything, because I found this after my love or obsession with Vim had sort of blossomed. But it might be handier or a better way for you to learn or learn some other techniques versus just the command line, which can be kind of dry if you're not motivated. Yeah, so that is the extent of that. So thank you for indulging me. Thank you for listening to me blather. Hopefully you learned something, and if not, come teach me something, please, because I always like to improve and learn stuff and meet new people, because I think I recognize 4 of you. So let's be friends after this. So yeah, thanks for your time.
On the dot files.
Yes. So I'm going to turn this off because I can't hear you very well, and mostly because I actually I sustained a bit of a head injury last week and recovering from a concussion, so I can't hear my left ear very well. So please speak a little louder if you can.
No worries. All right. So --rc --profile.
Right.
Profile.
What's the diff?
Walk me through the mess. What's going on?
Okay. I'm not exactly sure. So the things I've read is that
I can tell you a couple of settings. So for each different shell that you have a different profile. So if you're using bash shell or corn shell or C shell, so bash RC is going to be for bash. Right? But if you use .profile, it's going to be like a corn shell. So, but then if you look at the bash stuff or the others, you'll see some of them you'll have .bash RC, and there's some other bash ones. One of them will be for as soon as you enter the shell. So now if you open another shell, you're not logging in anymore, but you're entering the shell, so one of those scripts will be run.
Right.
But one of them is run during logon. So if you're logging on and you start up 2 shells, the second shell that you run only runs the shell startup one, not the login. But the first time you log in, you get the login. So each one has a slightly different. And then there's also a hierarchy. So you in your etc directory, you're going to have a .bash RC that's run globally when the system starts up. Then you have another one that's run for on your logon. there's another one that's one for a return. So there's a hierarchy in each shell, and the man pages will tell you which ones and interactive, non-interactive.
What's the RC part of this? They show up in all the files. What's RC stand for?
I don't know what it stands for. It's like the startup.
The convention.
Yeah.
The startup init levels, right? You have
Yeah.
your 6 init levels. So when you look in the RC, so when you start up, right, you can do a single user mode, multi-user mode. You go all the way up into your graphical mode, and each one is a different level: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 7.
Actually, yeah, I did have a note talking about so like the input RC in particular is for login shells, but which file is like the convention about which file does what? It actually differs depending on which platform you're on. So in some versions of Linux, like input, bash profile versus bash RC, like they kind of swap roles. What's informed my usage is that it was on. Jeez. Okay, I wasn't paying attention. Let's see. No, it's too dark. Hold on. I'll just describe. Okay, so like in my input RC, I have a lot of things that have to do with meta key setup, or I have things like, am I going to show hidden files? Am I going to show page completion? Or how I want my what am I going to show for command history and whatnot? Like how many pages I'm going to show for that? Whether I can search forward or backward, things like that. Versus in my bash RC, so that's the one that my understanding is typically that's where you do your personal kind of customization, and the bash profile, that one is more I've left that kind of fairly open for system stuff, like company specific. So when I got here, there was a bash profile file set up already to have git completion and a bunch of other things set up, so that we'd have similar aliases and whatnot, shortcuts for like starting and restarting servers, things like that. So the convention I adopted was that bash profile is like the organization's file, and bash RC is mine. Whether there's any like validity to that or not, I have no clue. I don't know, but that's just that's how it works out. But I break it up even further, so that like my bash RC is 23 lines with 5 lines that actually do something. The other ones just source a separate file I have for functions and aliases. So it's really short. And then the only really special thing here, or well, I guess the 2 things, is that I have it autocorrect my spelling for like minor typos. So like if you screw up when you're typing like change to like CD and you get it off by you're off by a letter or whatever, it'll just assume the correct answer for me and do that. And then the other important thing is I have a homebrew pref here, so that when I install applications using Cask, it will add it to the main applications directory rather than my personal, like my user's application directory. But it's super short, and conceivably I could source the like the functions and aliases from the profile as well, and I don't think there'd be an issue with that. That's just how it got sorted out.
I think what you said there is actually really good practice, to separate your own stuff into a separate file.
Yeah.
Source it from there.
Yeah. The only thing I believe there is sort of like an order to things as well, in terms of when bash profile and bash RC gets called, or there can be cases where it's one or the other. So as part of my Bootstrap setup, I have like when it gets to the end, it gives me a warning saying like you have one job to do manually, and that is add source my bash RC from my bash profile, because I don't know whether the way I've organized things based on company prefs, personal prefs, if that has any basis in reality other than just it works here. Again, another reason why I don't just like copy my stuff and then think that's the right way, because totally not. Just it works for me.
man page will give you the call hierarchy. It'll actually, if you do even man on bash, it'll tell you.
Does it? Interesting. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. That's that? Oh, hey. Yeah.
Any experiences or advice on the software that relies on dot files crashing because there's incompatibilities, like KDE is a bit guilty of that, have to regularly blow away the dot files directly because even during minor upgrades, the formats may not be the same, or sometimes it shares its cache with configuration and then that gets corrupted too.
I had an issue where Mitch, one of the other front-end developers, he was helping me try and debug a build issue. We used Maven for our builds. Is Maven's a build tool?
Yeah. Server.
Yeah, for the server. And that kept crashing, and the reason was that somehow, some way, I decided it was a good idea to create a .maven RC file and restrict the version of Java I was going to use there, which it took us probably a day and a half to figure out that it was, sort of 25 characters that were causing all this problem. But I mean, if you've worked in the biz, like that's your everyday. Hopefully not every day, but like that's just how it works.
Yeah, but it's like if you have KDE 4 and you do your configurations, it writes a giant dot file directory and it updates from from 4 to 4.0001, and that is enough for it to change the format of the dot files.
Well, in terms of I haven't run into any circumstances where the format or sort of the expected format of the dot file itself changed. There have been cases. So my OS 10 preferences system setup, I set that up initially on Snow Leopard because it wasn't until 4 months ago where I brought my personal machine up to whatever the current version is, like 10.11. I held out for so long because Snow Leopard was the best version ever, and we'll never get that back again. But there were a number of system level defaults there that were no longer applicable or didn't exist anymore. And luckily, the worst case the worst outcome of that was that I got an error message saying that when I tried to do set defaults or defaults right, the attributor key wasn't found. And so thankfully that's the worst it's been for me. But I would expect that, like in the case of Git, in the case of Vim, in the case of NeoVim, or any of my my Ruby dot files, like there would have to be a very, very significant reason or like a very compelling reason for them to change things around like that. Internal syntax in terms of like how you call functions or whatever, maybe like going for, or like what libraries exist between like Python 2 versus 3 or 4 kind of thing. But like that's actual language implementation. But in terms of how to read the preferences, I haven't come across that aside from certain preferences being deprecated. That's all.
About the Vim bundle or the bundle in Vim or these.
Oh, geez, that's right. I skipped that. Okay, that's important.
I'm surprised you didn't mention that.
Thanks, man. Yeah. Okay, so if you want to install plugins in Vim, there's like 17 really hard ways, and then 2 okay ways, and then 1 really easy way. There's one or 2 really easy ways. So there's a few different package managers or bundle managers that you'll use. Kind of like if you are used to if you come from a Ruby world where you'll have say bundler to worry about your gem dependencies to make sure it's consistent. You have something called Vundle is one, and then pathogen is another big one. That's the one I use. Why it just turned out that way? No reason. But that lets you. That takes care of all of the sort of installing and linking and doing all that other kind of stuff when you want to add, when you want to add bundles. to Vim to extend your functionality. So, for example, I have a really awesome one from Tim Pope that with like 2 keystrokes I can it'll split my screen, and on the right side it'll show the code, like the actual source file I'm working on, and on the left side it'll show me a git blame output with dates and who's responsible for what and which commit it's a part of. So you can really quickly go through and see, based on the context of the file you're actually looking at, as opposed to, actually, having to like jump out and go git blame and then go through and then sometimes sort of mapping what line you're looking at versus that one can be kind of a hassle. But this way it's all in the environment, which is really awesome. And then also do things like do your add partial files, full files, do your commits, all that stuff from within Vim. So like for me, what do? I press space GA. Space is the leader key. That's sort of your special key that activates things in Vim. If you want to do a command other than just sort of typing or switching between modes, and then that'll go. So I have space GA mapped to git add -p, so I can choose which changes I want to stage for that commit, and then similar, sort of leader GC will will initiate the commit process, and then dump me back into the console and let me fill out that glorious git message I have, and then on completing that, it just jumps right back in. So, like I said earlier, about similar to how, if you're familiar with Emacs, like Emacs can become everything for you. I haven't figured out how to check my email with Vim yet. I'm sure there's a way, but I have other tools to do that. But like Vim is Vim's my hub, and so within that, there are, in a given day, there's sort of 10 tasks that I know I'm going to do again and again and again, and so I have plugins set up so I can sort of jump into those contexts, and do those things, treating it the same way you would treat the different modes in Vim, because there's one mode where you're just you're viewing as you're moving through. There's one mode where you're going to select if you want to copy or paste text, and then there's a mode where you're going to edit, you're in the insert mode. And so plugins allow you to sort of create meta modes, such as now I'm in the Git mode, now I'm in the linting mode, now I'm in sort of a compilation mode, whatever, which is super handy, and again sort of helps you stay within the environment in Vim, and just really focus on that task rather than sort of oh, I need to do this thing, and then you're sort of mousing up, making sure you're hitting the right target, you're hitting the right menu, sub menu, coming back down, filling something in, and I'm actually kind of proud's not the right word. That's a foolish thing to say, but like I'm kind of happy that I don't remember all of the keyboard, like the shortcut commands for Sublime Text, because once like that muscle memory sort of is remapped to using commands in Vim, it's so much faster. But it's the sort of thing where your progress in terms of like, I don't know, if say the vertical axis is like how efficient you are at doing this thing in Vim, and the horizontal axis is time, it's the sort of thing where it kind of like just goes across, and you're like, this is stupid, this is the worst thing ever, why am I bothering? And then suddenly, oh wow, this is awesome. And then sort of like you have these like really significant jumps and then plateaus, depending on sort of what you're working on, and how willing you are to learn new tools, or if you experience new problems and then you seek out new solutions to those problems, because I guarantee that sort of 99 times out of 100, the thing you need to solve, the thing you need to do, someone's done it probably way better than you have, so you might as well do it the way they did, or use the tool that they've created for you. Especially if you're me.
Would you recommend using Vim emulation modes? So if I do rely on the high-level tools, but I still want to be immersed in the Vim for the occasional server stuff,
yes.
Would you consider using an emulator?
So I don't know that I've ever used an emulator. Is this something like you've used before, or like you're familiar with? I'm not sure.
Yeah, well, because usually when you go to an IDE, there is a checkbox on most of them these days that says enable Vim emulation.
Okay, interesting. So this is where I guess I show some of my ignorance. Like I used Visual Studio back at school for a couple semesters, doing like parallel programming, and for the two AI courses I took. But I didn't ever bother with it after the fact. I tried to use PHP Storm a couple jobs ago, and it just it drove me crazy because it didn't. I didn't work the way it wanted me to, or it didn't work the way I wanted to, whichever. So I've actually. I haven't, and here's maybe me being ashamed. I shouldn't encourage you to run to Vim because or run away from your IDE into Vim, because I haven't really harnessed the power or experienced the big benefits of using an IDE. So I don't even know what it's like to use sort of a Vim emulation inside of an editor. My initial sort of like naive idea is that similar things like for key navigation, that's probably part of it as well, and then maybe the modes, having the different switching between the different modes, so it's not like keyboard or mouse, like arrow key or mouse navigation. That maybe it maps like home row keys for navigation and then you can change modes like that, which is kind of an interesting thing. But honestly, if you're comfortable using an IDE, and it makes sense, like based on the technologies and tools you're using, then just fiddle with Vim on the side, or when you do have to access a remote machine or something like that, because then you won't be able to use your IDE. You'll be stuck and helpless.
No, that's one of the reasons I want to be immersed, because there are days when I absolutely have to do that.
And as far as different versions or flavors of Vim, if you're on OS 10. It comes pre-installed, but it's an old version. It's 7.3, and all the best plugins work on 7.4 and more recent than that. So you could try recompiling from source, which, I think you're asking for trouble. You can install MacVim, which is a really interesting idea, because it's a terminal emulator that only runs Vim. But it's a standalone kind of GUI, separate application rather than running inside of your terminal or iTerm or whatever. So all the sort of benefits and strengths of Vim are the command line, but I find that it's problematic and not as useful as it otherwise would be, because anytime I want to do some like chaining between commands, like if I want to run, so if I want to grep or use Silver Searcher to like find files that have this particular string, so find those, and then -L, just give me a list of files, and then dump that to Xargs, and then dump that into Vim, so that all of those will open in separate windows, or separate sort of layers in Vim. You can't do that in MacVim because you don't have the same kind of access to the terminal you do in a regular terminal. Whereas NeoVim, which I had listed on there in the links, and that is sort of that's Vim just in the terminal from the command line, the same as ever. So you can use it as a drop-in. And for a while, I just aliased V to go to open NeoVim instead, and there were no issues. It has some nice things built in, and it's also current. You could also install a more recent version of Vim using Homebrew if you like, and updating that, which once upon a time it was really, you're really cautioned against overwriting or updating the system version of Vim on OS 10, but now you can do it without worrying quite so much.
It occurs to me, relating the two together, the dot files.
Mm-hmm.
When you're on the command line and you take the history of the command and you want to edit your command, you can actually configure your shell to say what editor to use on the command line.
Yes.
Right. So if you're comfortable using VI commands and I don't know what it is, Control R, you can be in VI mode on your command line and,
yes.
and hop around. That's pretty cool.
I played a little bit with VI mode early on in my Vim adventures, and then I turned that off because I wasn't used to those. Like the key commands seemed a little more esoteric to me, and then also somewhere one or many of the various .file repos that other people had posted I was looking through. It says something along the lines of like, turn off Vi emulation mode or Vi compatibility mode because it's not the 70s anymore. Kind of thing is like, this is a joke, but
well, what it gives, like, as you know, you can jump to the beginning, jump
Yes.
to the end, replace the words in there, so it makes, you have a long command line where you're, whatever, sending a curl, getting a
Mhm.
response, doing something, and you need to change a word in the whole thing. You just do the search and replace.
Yeah.
And off you go, right? So it is pretty cool. And I think you would configure it through the .file.
Yeah. Well, and I probably learned more about Vim by trying to customize Vim.
Yeah.
Which is sort of like a weird kind of like circular thing where it's like, I'm not actually getting any work done, but I'm really learning this tool by trying to customize this tool, which I don't know, so when I'm customizing it, it's sort of like, what is it? Like the tail chasing the dog or whatever that saying is? Yeah.
Is it dangerous to play around with that stuff? Like, am I ever going to wreck Vim and never get it back?
Oh, no, no, I haven't had that happen. The worst outcome messing around with customization and whatnot is somehow I had it set to a mode where, again, this is sort of like not Vim in isolation. It was doing that thing where like I want a list of files that have this string I'm looking for, and I dump those out through Xargs and I dump it into Vim. But because of some weird configuration setting I had, I couldn't use the colon key, which meant I couldn't change modes, I couldn't edit anything, I couldn't save, I couldn't close, I couldn't do anything other than sort of kill the process and lose the changes I did make before that. Yeah, but that's more a matter of me not understanding fully how the Xargs command work, like sort of piping things back and forth, and also again, doing some customization that like I didn't read what it was doing. I just that seems like a smart thing. This smart woman does this, so obviously I should do that too. But no, it's the sort of thing where like you just blow your .vimrc file away, and then it goes back to defaults, vanilla Vim, and you're off to the races.
Okay. It was only recently that I found out that VIM is different from VI when I'm like typed it. I've been using Vim for a little while, but I thought I was using Vim, but I was actually just using Vim.
Okay.
So
like did you alias like V to VI instead of VM,
I didn't
or
really
just
say anything. I just didn't add the M on the end. So now, like I'm getting in the habit of typing VIM instead of. But I don't really notice the difference.
I think on any Linux install now, if you type VI, it actually aliases the.
Yeah.
Okay.
But it'll probably have the Vi compatibility mode turned on, so that if you're expecting those key commands to work, it will.
I'm kind of a newbie at Vim.
Sure.
I do really want to try out the Git customization because I use that on the command line more than anything else.
Big help.
Yeah.
Seeing that
Because I've got a Git auto completion thing that somebody else installed for me. It's like, hey, can you show me how to do that? And he's like, sure. And he just clones his own .file in, but he put it in a weird spot, and it doesn't match your, it doesn't seem so organized.
Well, so it used to be one file. Pardon me. It used to be two files. It used to be my vimrc and that bootstrap file, the bash script. And that's all it was. So I had a script that was probably like 1,400 lines long, which is stupid. So, sort of, chunking it apart, realizing, okay, separating concerns like this is for this part, this is for that part, and then going so far as sort of in its latest incarnation, like when I run the bootstrap file, I get to choose what I want to do as opposed to just sort of running it all and hoping that everything works out again. But there's aside from as we saw today, downloading VLC when I probably deleted it before. Like aside from installing things that I didn't want anymore, but didn't remove from the list of applications to install as part of the first run, like that's the worst that's happened to me.
Yeah, my homework is going to be looking through your repo.
Cool.
And find all the stuff.
Yeah, mine should be fairly readable and understandable. It's well, just don't look through the commit messages. There's some not nice language there.
It's okay.
You're all adults. You've probably experienced some of it, but
I've
yeah.
heard some of those naughty words before.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm always willing to learn a new language.
Yeah. that one time that actually was a problem that I applied for. This was just before I graduated. I applied for a job with SAP, and apparently they actually went through my in-depth my school projects on GitHub, and so there's one sort of final project for a solo software engineering course where I think the last 4 commits were along the lines of like fuck this, fuck that, fuck everything, fuck you too kind of thing, and the very last one was just beers, and the HR person had some questions for me. And I was like, is this like, do you think this is appropriate? And I was like, why'd you even interview me? Like, if you're gonna, give me grief about this, like that should tell you kind of what you can expect.
What makes a good commit message?
Yeah, I've learned since then.
Did you get the job?
No, I didn't. No. I think
I was in a working environment once where you could tell how sensitive a password was by how offensive it was. Because I guess by making their passwords really rude,
they wouldn't share it.
Nobody would want to say it out loud or write it down somewhere. Or it was always just, you kind of whisper it to somebody if they needed to know. It was like, by the way, it's this. You'd be like, ooh, sure, fine. I don't think it was effective.
That could be like,
it was not a good idea. It was just somebody's idea of like being witty, clever.
I could see that happening here, depending on someone's mood.
Depending on who's creating the
Yeah.
Stronger passwords, I think, are a better idea than just strongly.
Well, I have seen a tool that actually will go through GitHub and scrape public repos and see, like I've seen a compiled report of the most commonly used, curse words in commit messages.
Oh, right.
By language. Too.
Yes, by language. Yeah. To see who, which sort of dev is the.
There was something passed
most
around recently. It was it Tumblr? I don't remember what, but basically it was searching all of the commit messages on Git that had the F word in it.
Yep.
And you could just read them. It was like, and they were terribly amusing, really. It was a feed. No, it was Twitter. Somebody had a bot that was finding commit messages and tweeting them, retweeting the messages.
Just tweeting, like tweeting at the person who committed it, because that'd be a nice little sort of add-on. Because you can probably scrape that from the repo anyway.
Yeah, I don't know what it was doing, but it was an amusing read because you get the most frustrated sounding.
In say Sublime Text or in almost any text editor is going to have an option so you can see what line you're working on, and it'll number it from 1 to n. Okay, I have two things set up there so that it shows me the relative line number, so that if I'm on line 15, it shows the line numbers above and below me based on that. So 1, 2, 3, 4, like going up, or 1, 2, 3, 4, going down. While still preserving the line number I'm on. So if I'm on line 15, it'll say 15, and then sort of numbers will go up from there. The reason for that is that quick navigation between lines in Vim is not a straightforward thing. You can either move one key, like one row or one column at a time, or what you can do is you can move multiple. Right, you move one at a time, or like a page at a time, or you can specify I want to move 5, 6, 15, and then whatever. So in most navigation commands, even some insert and edit commands, you can say you can sort of basically use a multiplier. So I want to write out my name 10 times. So you might do like whatever it is for paste. Is it YY? No, why is yank anyway?
Why yank yank?
Okay, yeah. So like you can yank it, and then when you want to paste it, you can do like 5p or whatever it is, like 5 then your paste command, and then that will paste 5 of them in a row. Or if you want to do like line navigation, I know that this line I'm looking at here, in this method, it's a 10-line method, and I want to go to the end, that's on line 27. Well, unless I actually look and make the cognitive choice, like colon 27, I can just it's 5, so 5 down, 5 up, 5 down, 5 up, whatever, like that. That's why I use the relative line numberings.
You can think of cut and paste. Right? If you want to cut the next 4 lines, you with the relative numbers, you can see, it's 4 lines or it's 15.
If there are no other questions, thanks a lot. That was fantastic.
Cool.
Thank you.
I'm going to clap for you for dealing with that. Thank you.